So a little bit of background. So as Jennifer mentioned, I wrote this book called Yoga for Paddling. Yes, it has SUP yoga on it, but it's actually a book that has poses for paddling. And before I wrote that, I've been paddling for 30 years. Just a little background about myself. I've been paddling for 30 years. I started out working in the kitchen of a rafting company in between Ottawa and Montreal, where I grew up in Canada. And from there, I became a raft guide in West Virginia. I traveled all over the world. Kayaking, whitewater is definitely my passion. And I eventually tried out for the Canadian freestyle team and spent several years competing internationally in freestyle kayaking and extreme racing. And then during that time that I was an athlete, I noticed that women tended to struggle with certain skills or concepts. And I created an instructional DVD for women, the first of its kind at the time. This is back when DVDs were still cool. So this was in 2004. And I started running women's clinics around the country, around the US and Canada. And that has grown organically into a company I called Mind Body Paddle, because at the same time I I'm a certified yoga teacher and an Ayurvedic health coach, and Ayurveda is the sister science to yoga. And I started practicing yoga because it really helped me center myself during my competitive career. And so my jam is to have a really holistic approach to paddling and to mental agility for paddling, and for keeping our bodies and our minds strong, supple, flexible, right? For on and off the water. So I want to hear. So I'm here tonight. So I speak about some different topics depending on the group. And Jennifer invited me here to speak about yoga for paddling and how to the way I see it is prevent injury, right? When we have a holistic approach to our skills and our mindset. And so I want to hear, though, before I launch in, because I don't, and by the way, this is not a yoga class, obviously, this is a workshop type. And I do the workshop because my goal when I'm speaking with groups of paddlers is not to guide you through one yoga class, but to actually give you some knowledge about the body and about different poses that might help, and about anatomy for paddling, so that you can walk away and practice this for yourself beyond one yoga class. So before I get started in my spiel, I want to hear from you. So because I want this to be relevant for you, for those folks who showed up tonight. So what are you, I just want to hear, again, we have 40 minutes. So I want to hear from just a few people, maybe 2 or 3 folks. What compelled you to show up tonight for this talk specifically? What are you looking to get out? Do you have a specific question about shoulders, hips, back? You know, what's going on with you? Would love to hear if you want to unmute yourselves. No one's got anything going on? That's amazing.
Yeah, this is Janelle, and I would love to hear about kind of a pre-warm-up for paddling, and then some specifics for that I can integrate into a yoga practice on a regular basis. So 2 things: one for poses for regular workouts, and then another that would be helpful at our put in prior to the trips.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Janelle.
And Anna, in the chat, we have someone that mentioned hips, and then another person saying improving flexibility and core strength. And I'm happy to monitor the chat for you so that you can.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that.
This is Linda Young.
Yeah.
I just also wanted to mention hip pain on longer paddles. Just on one side, it starts. I don't know if it's the hamstring or the glute, but just wondering what I can do for that.
Okay, awesome. Yep, thanks, Linda. Appreciate that.
And Anna, we have another in the chat saying, Al says, just getting into paddling. What are some things I can do physically to get ready to paddle? I'm in good shape, but I'm super inflexible.
Yeah, so that goes back to the warm-up question as well. Great. Okay.
And Anna, for myself, I am on the computer a lot during the day, and I find that I think I'm entering into carpal tunnel land where I'm having, like some hand numbness and things sometimes at the end of a long paddle, probably because I'm gripping too hard. But I'm curious about that as well.
Okay. Got it. Okay, great. So I'm going to do some general knowledge, and then we're going to get into some of your questions. So if you all see this elastic in front of me, if I stretch this elastic out, does it get tighter or looser?
Tighter.
Gets tighter, exactly. Right? So the idea that stretching loosens muscles is actually inaccurate when we look at human anatomy, right? When we can get to a point where we overstretch, or another way to look at it is the muscles that we underuse in paddling can be chronically elongated, right? Or lengthened, while the muscles that we overuse in paddling can be chronically contracted. Okay, does everyone follow what I'm saying? So just the idea. So one big myth is that, my something hurts, I need to be more flexible, I should stretch. Okay, that is, yes, stretching helps for sure, and I'm going to get into why yoga is important, but I would like us to set aside this idea that all stretching is good and stretching all muscles is good. And that's because muscles are attached to bones via tendons, right? And so when some muscles are chronically contracted, they will actually pull. Let's take talking about the hips. So our hip pain often comes from sitting too long, our hips, the front of our hips being chronically contracted, which pulls the pelvis out of alignment, right? Because muscles are attached to bones through tendons. So our muscles are acting on our bones. And then, so what happens in kayaking, for instance, is that the front of the body tends to be chronically contracted and the back of the body tends to be weaker, right? Compared to the front of the body. Now, the first time someone, a master yoga anatomy teacher told me this, I was like, no way, my back is so strong. Like I have knots in my back because I'm paddling so much. And he was like, yeah, actually those knots are because your rhomboids are chronically lengthened and your chest, like your pectorals, are too strong. And so here's a question for all of you. What is the stretch that you tend to do most often, or you see people do most often right after they get out of their kayaks, specifically for your shoulders? Can anyone show me? I can't see everyone. I have to go through, but anyone want to kind of show me what is typical or what you think feels pretty good? Yes, Amy, thank you. Amy wins the prize. Okay, good. So what Amy did is this, okay? This is very typical across the board. Whitewater kayakers, sea kayakers, stand-up paddle boarders. So if we go back to what I just said about how the back of the body tends to be weaker compared to the front of the body. If we do this, what are we doing to our back body? What are we doing to the back of the shoulder? The shoulder blades. We're stretching it, we're elongating, okay? And what are we doing here? We're contracting. And so this stretch will feel good because anytime you stretch a muscle, there's oxygen and blood flow that goes to that muscle, okay? But long term, what we're doing is they're exacerbating shoulder problems for paddlers, typically by continuing to elongate. And that master anatomy teacher told me, stop doing this and your shoulder blade pain is going to disappear. Start squeezing your shoulders back. I mean, and if you all just, this is an interactive class. I don't know if I mentioned that in the beginning, but if y'all extend your arms in front of you and squeeze your shoulder blades back and hold, and you'll feel that this is not, it's not casual, as one of my teachers tells me, right? You have to work and you'll feel it, and then release, extend forward, and then squeeze back. And so if you see me from the side, I'm isolating my shoulder blades. Okay, I'm isolating, squeezing back, and moving forward. And you can do this against a wall. I call them shoulder blade push-ups. So the key is, in regular push-ups, you're bending your elbows because you're trying to strengthen your chest. But in shoulder blade push-ups, you're keeping your arms straight and pushing back against the wall to squeeze the shoulder blades together and release them. You can be on the floor on your knees, on your forearms, and really isolate the shoulder blades. This is one of the best exercises. And for those of you wanting a warm-up, this is one of the best warm-ups you can do. Whether you might have to do it against a tree at the put-in, or you could warm up against your car, right? You could bring, look, you can bring a mat and roll it out, and then roll it up and stick it in your boat, right? To take it with you if you want to do it on the ground. But what I really want you to take away is that not all stretching is equal. And it's really important that we get to know what our habit patterns are. And for kayaking, again, our habit patterns is for the front of the body, the chest, the shoulders, and the hips to be contracted. And so the work is to open that up. If you take one thing away from this talk, that's what I would love for you to take away, is open up the front of the body, in your shoulders and in your hips. So thinking about another thing that you can do is hold your hands behind your back, right? Clasp your hands behind your back, and you can sit on the very edge of your chair. And it does not matter. So here's another thing. People will get really focused on whether their arms are straight or not, and it really doesn't matter. I like to keep my arms bent. I have big muscles in my shoulders and my back. So for me, I don't have that hyper flexibility, which is good, right? That's a whole other conversation. But you can keep your elbows bent, hands against your sacrum, and simply squeeze the shoulder blades back, right? Open the collarbone.
How about holding a paddle and having it go up and down over your head?
If that feels good to you. I can't see who said that.
Amy.
So whoever that was, thank you. I can't see you, but so that is fine. So the key is to pay attention to your body. That some folks are not going to be able to do that. We all have different anatomy, different bone structure, right? So the key is to pay attention. And again, if you're ever leading a group, be sure to always allow them to do what is reasonable for them. And kind of, we got to check our egos as leaders, right? Because yeah, you might be doing something really cool, but it doesn't work for someone else. So if that works for you, that's great. The key thing to remember is even in an up dog or a cobra, some folks again will get really focused on how high they go, and their shoulders will actually be rolled forward. They'll be like, it'll look like something like this versus this. You see the difference, right? As paddlers, it's really important to roll those shoulders back and down, right? Having your arms straight or lifting as high as you can in Cobra does nothing for you if your shoulders are still rolled forward like this and hunched up towards your ears, because the other place that gets really tight for paddlers is our upper traps, right? Yeah. And we want strength in our upper traps. That helps us to lift. Well, I don't know how many of you, I like to really practice lifting my boat. I have smaller whitewater boats though, you know, up and over my head. It's good strengthening as I get older. It's like a form of weightlifting essentially. But we want to be careful of those traps and watch stretches or watch poses when we're not paying attention to drawing the shoulders back and down, because that can exacerbate also neck issues, right? Because all of this, everything is connected. And that's the other thing to remember is that our fascia, right, which is like, some people think of fascia as like this is very oversimplified, but imagine your muscles and your bones all wrapped in a layer of saran wrap, okay? Like that there's a layer of fascia. And so when we are in certain positions over and over again, and we never do the opposite action, and then we go to sleep, it's imagine like this shrink wrap. It just keeps shrinking and shrinking. And that's why folks lose mobility, or one of the reasons that folks will lose mobility as we get older is because we're not doing those opposite actions and really testing our range of motion. Okay, can I get thumbs up, thumbs sort of? Are you following? Thumbs down, following what I'm saying? Okay, good, great. So I just talked a little bit about the shoulders. So with the hips, if anyone here experiences low back pain, I want to say that your low back pain has more to do, I'm generalizing, okay? I'm not a doctor, first off, but in my experience working with lots of physical therapists and yoga therapists, and in my own practice, our back pain tends to have more to do with our hips, tight hips, than it does with our low back. But what is the stretch that we typically see or do ourselves when we get out of our kayaks at the end of a trip? You don't have to do it, but shout it out, maybe write it in the chat. What's a stretch that typically people go to when we're trying to stretch our low backs? I would say,
I guess it's like bending forward.
Yes, thank you, Carol. Thank you. Yes, someone said touch our toes. Thanks, Janelle. That's what we tend to do, is to want to touch our toes. And the thing with trying to touch our toes is that it actually makes our hips tighter, right? So it's the same problem as this kind of thing. And I'm not saying you should never stretch your hamstrings, but when you get out of your boat and you do a forward fold, it is problematic because your hips are staying super tight. So again, it will feel good in the moment because it's a different movement. Blood and oxygen will go to the muscles, but over time you're exacerbating the problem. And that's even worse if you have a herniation in your lumbar spine or a bulging disc. Forward fold, and it's out the back, forward folds will really, really aggravate that. And so what you want to do for your hips is anything that stretches the front of the hips. So what you want to do for your low back is anything that stretches the front of the hips. So that means lunges, high lunges, low lunges, windshield wiper pose, standing on one foot, maybe having a friend help you balance, right? Taking your ankle, doing a one-legged stretch, a quad stretch. So any of these stretching the front of the hips, because what that's going to do is, again, instead of all the front of the hips pulling the pelvis out of alignment, it's going to allow the pelvis to come back into alignment. And then if you want to stretch your hamstrings, the best stretches, like someone at the beginning was asking for the best pose ideas for class or for your yoga practice. So if I could only do one yoga pose for the rest of my life, it would be this one for paddling. It would be this sequence right here, and with a strap. Because if you don't use a strap, then you're exacerbating shoulder you're putting your shoulders at risk. Whoops, let's see. So, wrong way. So using a strap, extending your leg, use the strap so that, and then taking it out to the side and then across the midline, and then eventually all the way across, still holding the strap. And notice how I have my other arm extended here, because this is actually not only a hip stretch, it's a lovely pectoral stretch as well. So it gets both. So that, and the reason that that pose is so good for hamstrings and hips is it because you're lying on your back on the floor is supporting you. So unlike when you go into a standing forward fold so we all have habit patterns in our bodies, and whether we're aware of it or not, we have certain muscles that we have overdeveloped due to habit patterns, the way we stand, what we learned from our parents, what we learned from what we've picked up over time. And those big muscles are not always the most effective muscles. So when we do something like a forward fold, when we don't actually have the hip flexibility in our pelvis, those muscles that are overcompensating will kick in, and that can cause even more problems. So when we're lying on the floor, we're supported, right? We're not letting those habit pattern muscles kick in. And so we're really able to focus in on the hamstring and the hips. So again, for hip, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you. In the chat, Robin mentioned buffalo or stargazing pose, perhaps for back stretching.
I don't know the names of either of those poses, so I would have to.
I'll chime in. They're Tai Chi, and buffalo is bent at the waist with knees bent, hands extended forward, sort of a plane, one plane back to arm. And stargazing would be bringing it up, but then tilting the back and the head up. But it was more in regards to your question of what stretch one does. And I also made the line she didn't write in the chat that I wrote is, I'm buying this book. I've done body work for a long time. You're really spot on. It's really nice. I don't want to interrupt you or your flow. Keep going. You're really great.
Good. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah, and I'm not as familiar with Tai Chi. I've gone to a few classes and I love it. I have too many practices. I have to hone it down, but I do love Tai Chi. Any mindful movement is so good. And that goes for warming up before the river too. It doesn't have to be a yoga pose or a yoga warm up. Start tuning in to what feels good. And I would add, with this knowledge of knowing that you want to do the opposite action to how you're sitting in a kayak and how you're paddling.
I wanted to comment on the large muscle that you're talking about. Is that's something also, after even so many years of doing Tai Chi, you're thinking you're strong. It's actually more about the breath and being soft. The power is always there. It's just that actually, when you think about it, it almost binds it up a little bit. And so that's why I think your mat idea is really fantastic.
Yes, I'm not afraid to roll out a mat in any place where it's helpful. So yes, that's for sure. And I'll share a story of one of my own. So I was having, I started having a lot of pain along my IT band, the outside of my right leg. And I was going to yoga class. I have a practice every morning. And in a lot of people would be like, oh, roll out your IT band. So I was rolling it and it just kept getting worse. And we were people were like, practice pigeon. We were practicing lots of pigeon. And I thought I was doing the right thing. And I finally went to my yoga therapist, who's also my physical therapist, and trained in both, which I love. I'm sure there's tons of those in Portland too, by the way. I would imagine. I love having that holistic approach, someone who's trained in physical therapy and is also a yoga therapist. So anyway, she said, no, what you need to start doing is squatting. You need to start strengthening your back body, those glutes, because what's happening is that your IT band is actually, it's overstretched and your glutes aren't strong enough. So what's happening is that this little muscle called the TFL inside the hip is clamping down, because your glute is not strong enough to help stabilize the IT band. So the TFL is clamping down on the IT band and making it really tight, but you rolling it out is actually making it worse because it's already like stressed and stretched out. And once I started doing squats and strengthening my glutes, the pain went away and I stopped doing pigeon. And I stay away from pigeon just because I know that my habit pattern in my body will tend to overdo it that way. And so once you get to know yourself, and that can be really helpful as well. So the other piece of this is stretching the front of the hips and doing squats and strengthening the glutes so you get nice and strong back there. And also, you know, as we age, I've heard from several sources, you know, one thing that can really help keep us healthy and mobile is to continue to squat, to be able to squat low and stand back up without assistance. And so it's just a good overall longevity exercise, regardless of whether you're kayaking or not. And so,
Anna, there's a couple questions I'm going to pop in here with, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yes. Tom's wondering what the IT band is.
Yes. It's the iliotibial band. It's the band that runs, so the outside of your leg. I can show my leg. It's the outside of your leg, from your hip all the way to your knee. And if you Google it right now, if you're at your computer, you can Google the IT band, and there's some good anatomy online that you can check out.
Great.
And you can check out, actually, if you get my book, I have there's actually 2 illustrations of anatomy in my book, of the human body and the anatomy for paddling. So I point out some of these muscles also in the book. So,
and then Mari was wondering if you could name the hip stretches again. You had said lunges.
Yep. High lunge, low lunge. You could do windshield wiper pose, which is on your back with your knees spread apart, your feet wide, and moving your knees back and forth together, right? Like windshield wipers. You could do, you know, a one-legged quad stretch. These are all really good stretches. And the one that I talked about with the strap, yes, it gets the hamstring, but when you take your leg out to the side, people think that you're stretching this leg that's out to the side, but you're not. That's not actually the point of that. The point is to stretch the front side of the other leg, right? So you're stretching across. So that one is very good as well.
There's also a question if bridge pose helps in stretching the hip. Oh.
Yes, bridge pose does. The thing with bridge pose, what you want to watch is that your knees don't splay way out, that you want to have your knees over your ankles, and imagine that you're holding a yoga block between your knees and you're gently squeezing it so that you create some tone. A lot of folks, when they go into bridge, they press up and their knees are splayed out, and that is not helpful for the alignment of the hips or for the lower back.
And then Amy's asking, how about chair pose?
Chair is great. Chair pose is a squat essentially, right? So, and the lower you can go in chair pose, the thing with chair pose, well, is what I recommend to my clients is let go of having the arms over the head. Like, focus on one thing or the other. Like, I'll often do it with my hands in prayer position. So I'm really focusing on my glutes, and that I'm not overdoing it. Again, because we're paddlers and we're putting a lot of stress on these upper traps. Remember that yoga poses don't have to be one way. It's really about getting into a shape, paying attention to what that shape and the feedback that you're getting from your body, right? That doesn't mean that you want to stop just because it feels hard, right? There's going to be some shaking, there's going to be some discomfort. And you do want to pay attention though, because if you're like holding up and then later you have like neck pain and it doesn't feel good, that's a sign that your body's telling you, hey, why don't you draw your shoulders back and down and go into prayer position with your hands instead. Yeah.
And then there's just some comments, using the time while you're brushing your teeth to do some squats would be.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Totally. It's great. Anytime you can work them in. And that's the other thing is small. So in whitewater kayaking, we talk about hard moves in easy water. That's a big philosophy, and it's part of the framework that I use when I'm teaching my clients. And hard moves in easy water, not just for skill, but also for mindset. One of the principles is that small, consistent actions pay off over time, right? It's like compounding interest. So some people, and you know, sometimes I might be one of them, type A personality, and we think, oh, well, it's not worth going out. It's just class 2, whatever, or it's just flat water or whatever people make up. Or I ski at a local hill, believe it or not, in North Carolina here in the mountains, we have a ski hill. And some people are like, oh, it's only 700 vertical. I'll just go out west for a week. Okay, that's one way, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think we miss out sometimes when we forget that small, consistent actions over time lead to big results. And so when I go to the small ski hill, it helps prep my legs and keep them strong, and helps keep the neural pathways in my brain, right, for that movement strong and connected, so that when I do go out west, I'm prepped, I'm ready. And so the same thing, why I'm sharing this, is the squats while you're brushing your teeth. It matters if you're doing 5 minutes, 2 minutes, it will make a difference. You know, I always tell folks, my clients, it's better to do 15 minutes of yoga 3 to 4 times a week than it is to do an hour and a half, like once every 2 weeks, right? Because it's not that either one is better or worse. You know, depending on what time you have, but the idea of, oh, well, it's only 10 minutes, it won't make a difference, is really a construct. It's a belief that isn't true, that we tell ourselves. So practice those hard moves in easy water, just like you would practice, you know, the moves you want to be proficient at as you move up in venue, if that's of interest to you, right? In ocean kayaking, you practice those in a low consequence venue first before you actually move up to the harder venue. So as far as warm up, my book, so I want to share I'm not going to share my screen, but I'm going to share my YouTube channel with all of you. And actually I'd pulled up all of the links I wanted to share, except for this one, because I have a warm-up video on my channel.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna drop that in the chat. You might search for it, but I have a 6-minute warm-up and I think an 8-minute warm-up, and it's what I use before I go paddling, and it's focused on the joints. So it's a little bit, it is actually a combination of more martial art and yoga. It's focused on going through all of the joints of the body, which helps to start things moving. And to your point, Jennifer, getting like some wrist movement and getting movement in the joints. Wrists are challenging for sure. I think it's really important to pay attention to them. Yeah, the warm up does help the wrist joints. It helps warm up. What I would say for wrists, if you're experiencing problems, one thing that I have found really helpful for myself is getting a bench shaft paddle. And you might already have a bench shaft paddle, but bench shaft paddle will really help the angle of your wrist, right? And if I had my paddle, I would show you that when you have a straight shaft paddle, you're holding it straight. See how my wrist is really bent at an angle? When you have a bent shaft, the bend helps your wrist come back into alignment, so there's not that off angle. And you can go into any retailer and test it out. Hold the bend of a bent shaft paddle and hold the straight shaft. But if you are an enthusiast who loves to paddle and you paddle a lot, it's really worth investing in a bent shaft. And the other thing I will say is try out a small shaft paddle as well. If you can try out a small shaft, bent shaft paddle, because also the grip, it's easier to grip a small shaft paddle than it is a regular shaft. And that does make a difference for the wrists and all of these muscles. That might make a huge difference. I know it has for me. Let's see. I think I've addressed most of the questions that folks had. Any other, so again, just to recap, because I want to be cognizant of time, to recap, so the idea again, remember this idea of the elastic, right? So just because you're stretching does not mean that you are actually enhancing your muscles. We want a muscle that can come back to its normal shape and has the ability to stretch, but then also contract, but then at resting is not chronically either way. As we get older, that becomes harder and harder because again, we have habit patterns that we do over and over. And the other thing is that we want to counteract the position of sitting in our kayak and counteract the position of paddling forward. And remember that if you paddle backwards, if you spend some time every time you're out paddling backwards, that will help. It will be really healthy for your shoulders. Sitting in a kayak, one of my yoga teachers who is also a paddler, he would say, yeah, if I were gonna develop a like special machine designed to ruin your hips and your back, it would look like something where you had to sit with your legs externally rotated and had to press up, up into thigh braces. And he also is very knowledgeable in anatomy. And the truth of it is that kayaks are not great for our anatomy. It's not a great position to spend hours and hours in. And that is why one of the best things you can also do is when you're out on a long paddle is be sure you take breaks. Get out, just like, we've been hearing more and more about the science saying like stand up every 45 minutes or every hour if you're sitting at a desk. Just remember that kayaking is awesome and super fun and we love it. It is still sitting. And so your body wants and needs a break to get out and stretch. And that will go a long way as well. I know some whitewater paddlers get really stubborn about not getting out, or, well, sometimes we have to portage though. And some people will also be stubborn about only carrying their boat on one shoulder, and never switching to the other shoulder. And my clients will say, well, I can't carry it on my left side. And there may be some physical limitations for sure, right? Or injuries that will prevent you. But barring that, yes, it's hard, but practicing, and I might be talking to the wrong crowd because I know sea kayaks, you probably don't carry on your shoulders, but for whitewater, the example that I'm giving is that if you're always doing something on one side, make sure to switch sides, especially when it involves carrying your kayak or whether you're pulling your kayak behind you on a cart. Same thing, switch sides, make sure you use the other side. Okay, I could go on and on, but I'm going to stop there. Any other questions? I really appreciate y'all having me, and I hope this was helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. If you've been sitting on a question and want to put it in the chat or just come off mute and ask it, either way.
This is Janelle, and I just bought Anna's book for our Oops library. So there'll be a copy
Awesome.
there soon.
Great.
Janelle.
Thank you.
So I also ride a horse, and I think your yoga book, those poses would be good for horseback riding as well.
Yep. Agreed. They're good for anything, any sitting. So cycling is similar as well. Any sport where you're hunched over essentially slightly, not that we want to be hunched over and we want to have good posture, but we end up kind of with our shoulders rolled forward. So
an exercise where people put their arms up like this, like in a doorway on either side and kind of push forward. Is that a good shoulder blade?
That's an awesome one. What I like to do too is I take two, and you'll see it in the book, I take two yoga blocks and put them alongside, and I'll lie on the yoga blocks right from the middle of my shoulder blades up, and it's like you're doing snow angels. You can also do it on a foam roller. Lie along the foam roller along your spine, and that feels really good. That's a really, really great exercise for the shoulders.
Sometimes I just lay on the edge of my bed and put my arms down back over the side to try to get that chest stretch too. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it feels good.
Yeah. Again, paying attention to what feels good. Anything that opens, I think is good.
And you can let one of your legs drape off the side of your bed and stretch your hip flexors that way.
Oh, yes.
Well,
yeah, as long as it feels okay on your back, it's good.
Doing all those exercises in bed is a lot warmer and softer than doing them on the floor.
Sure.
There we go.
Great.
That's how I wake up.
Great. Yep. Good.
I have a different question for you, Anna. Do you know who Jack LaLanne was?
No.
No.
I
Okay.
don't.
You look at the faces if you can on some of the people. All of us old farties are all just laughing right now.
Yeah.
I think Jack LaLanne hauled a barge from Alcatraz to San Francisco at like 70 years old. Anyways,
Wow.
Your answer was priceless. Thank you.
Oh, it was a trick question. I get it. Thanks.
We could
70 rowboats.
we could do a poll to see how many people know the answer to that question, Robin.
Right.
Probably only about 20 or 30% of our people.
I'm new to the board, but I've noticed it as I get older, Jeff. My references are just lost.
Yeah.
You'll just have to create new ones, Robin.
I think
you're it. I started practicing Tai Chi in the 70s, and so the positions and the things that you're saying, the postures, it really, you're very knowledgeable and really a good instructor. It's really a pleasure for an old guy like me to see. You are the new guard. It's wonderful. I put a question in there about injuries and chronic injuries, and at our age, we carry on with things that we know. So it's like even understanding, this is how I hold my body. It very technically. We know it from just actually holding it. But if something hurts, I can't hold my body that way. And so therefore, like you say, the counter starts to hurt because I'm compensating. And, that's where I'm at right now is, tendons as we get older, they'll just snap. I've had tendon transfers and torn biceps, and those things just exist. So now how does the energy flow through my body? Just because I say I want to hold a posture, I can't necessarily do it because you're met with some pain on the way to doing that. And so that's what I'm trying to do is be softer, where I think that I have to pull harder because I'm not making it. It's more just to breathe out at that moment and just sort of follow through with whatever power there is in the whole body movement. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think it's great. It's wonderful. You're tuning into the flow of, what's working for you, which is,
well, it's not always working. That's why I'm listening to you too.
right. But you have that awareness, right? You're building self-awareness, and self-awareness is the most powerful thing we can build for ourselves because it gives us choice.
Alignment too. I think many of us are not aware of the alignment, you know, knee over toe and tushy over heel, you know, so you have a column, a straight column, you know, and it becomes harder to hold it even if you know it, you know, so.
Yep, definitely. And I encourage everyone. Physical therapists are amazing. If you find a good physical therapist too, so what I do for regular maintenance, just regular maintenance, is physical therapy once a month when I'm feeling fine, just to keep up, just to check in. You know, my regular yoga practice. I go to chiropractor once a month. There's a chiropractor in Asheville, and I'm sure there are some in Portland that they're not like what you'd think of as traditional chiropractors that are cracking your neck, and she's very in tune and has a lot of different training. And I also get massage, you know, once a month. And it's an investment. And, you know, when you look at athletes, people who have longevity in any sport, they have a health regime, they have an investment. Like they have this, they invest in their health because health is our greatest wealth. And so, you know, I just want to encourage everyone to, if something is hurting, like you're saying, don't just try and deal with it. Like yes, it's important to try what I've talked about and go see someone, right? Go see someone, get someone to look at your body and you know, why suffer a long time when you could go see someone who's an expert and they can help you really take care of it. And the same thing with kayak instruction. I'm biased, but you know, kayak instruction is really important. Same thing. Why go on and on when you could be way more efficient and having a lot of fun if you were engaging your core, you know, more, or you know, whatever it is. Engaging the core is a big one. Yes.
Thank you, Anna. I put a link to your website and to your book in the chat. And you put your YouTube link in there. Is there anything else that you'd like to share out?
I think I will share out if anyone's interested. I offer free webinars once a month. They're often based around mental agility for whitewater kayaking, but they are, I'm just going to post my next one in there. That's the registration. It's free. And really, I post them mostly on my social media. They're actually not up on my website, but you can follow me on Facebook, Anna Levesque, or Mind Body Paddle. I have a business page, and on Instagram, Anna C. Levesque. So, and you can see that, and I'll be doing some yoga for paddling webinars in the new year as well. And you can check out different offerings on my website. I do virtual programs and in person. If any of you want to come to the East Coast and do some whitewater kayaking.
Come to the West Coast. We have join us on an event.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Right? We'll be, Lopez. Robin can tell you more. Seriously. Awesome. It's a good possibility. I hope.
Well, thank you again, Anna. For folks, if you want to save those links, if you're on a computer, in the chat, where you would type your question or comment, there's the smiley face icon, and then there's 3 little dots. If you click on those 3 little dots, you can save the chat, which allows you to then have access to those links after we've ended the meeting. And I saved the chat, so when Mark does his magic to make the recording available and we post it up onto our YouTube page, I'll include those links in there as well. And Anna's got her email address in there. So please feel free, I guess, to reach out to you. And
definitely.
And everyone, please join me in thanking Anna one more time for coming. We really appreciate it. It's 11 o'clock now your time. So
I know.
It's great time.